Yo, welcome back. I just got a haircut. You think I have a job interview tomorrow? You think I'm gonna get it? I'll let y'all know by probably like 2 days. But today we got a video on BoJack Horseman. I don't know if this is like one of my favorite shows all time, like top 5 shows. And it's an adult animation, but it's nothing like what you think. It's nothing like Family Guy or American Dad. It's a really deep, layered show. It's like probably like the deepest, like in all of fiction, one of the deepest layered shows. It has great writing, great story building, and we're gonna watch this video by Sloan Stowe. Hope I'm saying her name correctly, but this is gonna be a very interesting video because I want to learn more about Bojack Horseman. I know a lot about him, but I know nothing at the same time. And we're gonna dive straight into it. Let's get these headphones on and let's check it out.
It also makes what I'm trying to do here a little harder. Because if we go off the cold, hard facts, the black and white actions of every character, we'd have to acknowledge certain things we may not have considered in a discerning light. Like Hollyhock nonchalantly drugging Todd and Bojack, Todd committing genocide, and Princess Carolyn dating an actual child. I think that part's still a little unclear. Nevertheless, these situations are played for laughs, and that matters because as an audience, even though we know that Hollyhock knocked out Bojack and Todd multiple times before Beatrice slips speed into her coffee, we also naturally know which instance we are meant to take seriously.
Sorry again, it's just so fun.
So, parameters. We'll keep the underlying message of the jokes, when they're there, but we'll disregard the absurd. Basically, if the show doesn't take it seriously, I'm not going to. Which should be easy, because as zany and ridiculous as the stories can get, BoJack Horseman is a show that grabs you by the collar, pulls you close, and tells you when it wants to be taken seriously. We're going to analyze some of the characters from the main cast, breaking down their actions, views, and personal ethics, and how those things change throughout the series. We're going to talk about the show's
Who's y'all's favorite character? Mine is probably Mr. Peanut Butter and Todd. Todd.
themes, the writer's intentions, the audience's takeaways, and how those takeaways affected later seasons. But first, as always, a spoiler warning for the following. Weirdly, I didn't go too off book for this one. Sources are linked in the description. And I think that's it. Okay, let's start. My personal favorite, Princess Carolyn, is one of the most complex examples of moral grayness in the series. We need to preface with something, though. In the original pitch, creator Raphael Bob Waxberg claimed he didn't intend for BoJack Horseman to have a large focus on the entertainment industry. He later admitted this was a blatant lie, so the show would be more likely to get picked up. Raphael was absolutely interested in exploring the machinations of Hollywood and BoJack Horseman, the good and the bad, but evidently mostly the bad. Because the show takes place in a Hollywood-adjacent world, Raphael Bob Waxberg felt a responsibility to shed light on some of its very real faults. He said, "Part of our job in being a show about show business is to point out the things of show business that are kind of gross and aren't quite right." And they do. BoJack Horseman dives into a myriad of prevalent issues: sexism, the flagrant mistreatment of Hollywood assistants, toxic celebrity culture, Hollywood's role in performative feminism, child stardom, and continuing to give horrible people power. They comment on actors, agents, network execs, blockbuster directors, indie directors. The writers don't exempt themselves from their criticism either, first mildly in Season 3 with veteran sitcom writer Cuddly Whiskers portraying writer pretentiousness.
Send me an email, cuddlywhiskers@harvard.edu. That's H-A-R. I got it.
Later, in Season 5, they dive deeper into exploring the quintessential power-hungry showrunner with Flip McVicker, who is
I don't know if she's gonna touch this, but that part in BoJack Horseman, when Cuddly Whiskers disappeared, and then BoJack and Diane are like confronting him about it, and he was like, "I don't need to apologize for making myself happy." That part stuck with me the most. Like I felt like that had a lot of weight to it. It's one of my favorite moments of the show.
equally as insecure as he is full of himself, and is unable to take criticism, but quick to take credit for everything.
The whole point of television is it's a collaborative medium where one person gets all the credit.
As the main cast's only Hollywood agent, Princess Carolyn's character frequently allegorizes corruption in the entertainment industry. In the earliest episodes, when the show was still finding its footing and the characters were less fleshed out, this was more exaggerated.
I Sarah Lynn doesn't have an agent? Laura, hold my calls. Cancel everything. Ahab's got a white whale to catch, baby.
I don't think these offshore banks we've been using are 100% legal.
Yeah, well, my mother told me never to slap an idiot.
What?
As the show progressed, the writing mellowed out a bit, but still carried a similar sentiment.
What is going on here?
Only the future.
This is horrifying, and it doesn't look legal, but whatever it is, you better be cutting me in for 10%.
Beyond a talent agent's stereotypical attributes, Princess Carolyn's character opens doors to portray several industry-prevalent topics, such as hustle culture, talent agency dynamics, nepotism, and unpaid internships.
What do you mean, like modern reading slaves?
Exactly.
Many of these jokes are told in passing, nudges between the writers, but the show will also explore issues deeper, wrapping entire episodes around problems like the industry's role in desensitizing gun violence, sexism, and commonplace edifices of complicity that Princess Carolyn is quick to partake in. Yes, PC is ambitious, hardworking, and manipulative, but she's also satirically representing to the audience a quintessential power agent in Hollywood. Sometimes there's a distinguishable line between what the writers are trying to say about the industry versus what they're trying to tell us about Princess Carolyn as a character. Typically, it's easier to overlook Princess Carolyn's ethics because where Bojack and Diane's senses of self and character arcs are very much tied to morality, Princess Carolyn's aren't. She's kind of just busy with other stuff. She's more secure in her own sense of self. Not that she has it all figured out, but just that it's not as integral to how she navigates the world or views her identity. This doesn't mean she's a quote-unquote bad person. Princess Carolyn is not outwardly rude or inconsiderate in the way that Bojack is. In everyday life, she's generally nice, polite, and thoughtful to the people around her, going out of her way to help her clients to a fault. Where her immoralities come into play typically concern her career. The thing is, Princess Carolyn would be happy to always do the right thing, so long as it aligns with her best professional interests. But in an industry that constantly ignores her potential and achievements and tends to value money and power over ethics, her best interests and the right thing aren't always one and the same. And more often than not, she's rewarded for lies and manipulation.
Exactly. We're not making them feel unsafe, we're just profiting.
And, if PC is not directly involved with an issue, she doesn't always care. Or she cares obligatorily, but she doesn't really care.
Well, I've got your back, right? We women have got to stick to, hey, fruit plate.
Princess Carolyn's focus is ambition and self-preservation. Unlike Diane, she doesn't want to stir the pot or make waves. She does what she needs to do to survive in the industry. She's all the less willing to compromise her career because of how much she sacrificed for it.
I have given everything to get where I am, and I am not about to throw all that away.
In some ways, it's a far cry from how she grew up. Princess Carolyn spent her childhood with selflessness as her defining trait, constantly prioritizing her family's needs above her own. She'd frequently fill in for her alcoholic mother as a maid for a wealthy family.
So unless I wanted us to be out on the street, I had to step in and cover for her. A lot.
Quickly solving other people's problems is how she had to survive.
My mom, well, obviously she was planning on cleaning the floors, but I asked her if I could do it.
Princess Carolyn was the last of her many siblings to stay behind to take care of her mother. I don't think it's a coincidence that the first selfish decision Princess Carolyn makes is also the decision that dramatically changes her life for the better. PC retains many of the traits she developed in childhood, like her tenacity and intelligence. But from this point on, her life revolves around a paradoxical dichotomy between selfishness and selflessness. This dynamic is perfectly encapsulated in her profession. As an agent and later a manager, Princess Carolyn takes 10% of her clients' paychecks. She's not paid per hour, and she doesn't earn an annual salary. What she makes and how much she makes is literally contingent on how good she is at helping her clients get work.
You ever notice how, as a woman, you only make 10 cents for every dollar your clients make? Really makes you think, huh?
There are some exceptions, but the parameters of her job naturally dictate that to be selfless, she has to be selfish, and to be selfish, she has to be selfless. This same dichotomy extends to her personality. As an adult, she reverts to the role of helping those around her that she was forced to do as a child. Princess Carolyn defaults to this mode naturally. It's borderline a trauma response. We see it manifest into helping people around her, like the countless times she takes care of Bojack. or when she gets Diane a job doing social media.
Because my life is a mess right now, and I compulsively take care of other people when I don't know how to take care of myself.
This is a coping mechanism PC uses to soothe her own stress. Although her actions are selfless and she is helping other people, she does have the conscious intent to make herself feel better. Interestingly, Bojack recognizes this trait in her.
You let me help you tonight because you knew I needed it. You did it for me.
Of course, that opens up the debate of psychological egoism versus altruism. If a person does a good deed for another person, but also benefits from it themselves, is their action inherently selfish? Psychological egoism says yes. Altruism says no. The show actually touches on this exact philosophy in The View from Halfway Down, with the characters, at least through Bojack's subconscious lens, having varying opinions.
If you got pleasure, it wasn't selfless, and it's only good if it's selfless.
I helped people. Who cares if it made me feel good too?
Nevertheless, Princess Carolyn cares deeply about the people close to her. She tolerates Bojack's flighty mistreatment of her for years, helping him even when he's manipulative and dismissive of her.
Now, why don't you leave this to the grown-ups? If somebody needs coffee, I'll give you a ring.
Okay. Best of luck.
She lets Todd move in with her, and even after Sadie makes it clear she won't let Princess Carolyn adopt her baby, PC continues to show her kindness.
You want to keep the baby? You want to give the baby to someone else? Fine. Just do what you want to do.
After I told them I wasn't going to give them the baby, they all went cold or nasty. Except you. You were still nice. I think that's a sign.
Like Diane, Princess Carolyn has a tendency to get tunnel vision and miss the bigger picture. But while Diane's hyperfixations stem from "this is wrong," Princess Carolyn's are more of a product of "this needs to be fixed."
You're seeing things in absolutes. We can wriggle out of this. Who's we?
In these moments, all PC can think about is closing the deal, spinning the story, fixing the problem, putting out the fire, being good at the job. It's easy for her to fall down this rabbit hole and get lost in how she can solve what's right in front of her, without considering the ethical ramifications doing so might have. Maybe the worst example of this is when she hires well-known horrible person Vance Wagner to star in Filbert. This is particularly bad because this isn't an instance where she's complicit to something unethical that's already happening. Princess Carolyn is the one who suggests Vance's name. She takes him out to lunch to convince him to join the show, fully knowing and not caring about his problematic past.
Once word gets out that it's okay to hire you again, all the other offers will come rolling in.
It isn't until Vance double-crosses PC and backs out of the Filbert contract that she admits that she was wrong and wants to punish him. This same thing happens during the Hollywood assistant strike. Princess Carolyn's default position is to find a way to end it the fastest way possible while losing the least amount of money possible. That's the problem she's fully fixated on. It takes Princess Carolyn hearing a phrase she was repeatedly told when she was an assistant to make her snap out of this fight-to-win mindset and see the bigger picture. Getting Judah to represent the assistants is one of the best things PC does, and we're proud of her for it.
Let the negotiations begin.
Over the series, we see PC shift
Judah is one of my favorite characters too. He just gets the job done.
from someone who is complicit and, at her worst, even encouraging of the systemic issues within the industry, to someone who is actively making it a better place. She declines Turtletop's offer and decides to start her own production company in the way that she can fully design from the ground up. She agrees to open up a daycare to make her employees' lives easier, and she backs Diane's children's book series, encouraging her to write it, despite Diane's hesitation.
I liked it. I like thinking that my daughter could grow up in a world with books like that.
Although the characters in Bojack Horseman definitely vary in their scales of positive and negative actions, this series makes it a point to show that they are all capable of both good and bad. It's hard to find a character that hasn't done something wrong. It is safe to say that the worst sins fall on the eponymous protagonist, Bojack Horseman.
Oh, and I bet eponymous was supposed to be a pun on pony. Ugh.
There are Reddit threads and YouTube videos dedicated to listing and categorizing every bad thing Bojack has ever done. Even Bojack.
The worst thing he did was when he was in that trailer park in Albuquerque with that young girl, and after they went to prom. He almost had sex with her, or he did not. I can't remember. I think he almost did, and then he got walked in on that girl's mom. That's probably the worst thing he did. I mean, one of the worst things it happened like the first season. Like, he sabotaged Todd when Todd had that band, or like, do y'all remember talking about that band or that musical? And then Bojack paid the woman off. I forgot. She's really cool too. Actress something, actress star. I forgot her name, but she paid him off to make to say that Todd's musical was trash to get Todd to stay, and didn't let Todd get better for himself.
Jack's tried it. We could look at these lists, pick out a few random things, and conclude that by social and cultural...
Damn, hold on. I'm gonna look at this real quick.
This was supposed to be a pun on pony. Ugh.
There are Reddit threads and YouTube videos dedicated to listing and categorizing every bad thing Bojack has ever done. Even Bojack's tried it. We could look at these lists, pick out...
Tried to steal Diane from peanut butter. Plot to destroy their wedding. Hit a deer. Damn! Broke Diane's arm. I forgot how that happened. Encouraged Gina to embarrass herself by singing a song. I think I do remember that. That was awkward.
out a few random things and conclude that by social and cultural...
Oh yeah, the right, Sarah Lynn, and she died. And she's like, "Oh my goodness, bro, that's so good." She was like, "I don't like anything about myself." I was like, "Yo." So the Hollywood D is funny, but yeah, I guess it's bad. Yeah, Margot Martindale. That's what I was talking about earlier.
Standards, yeah.
Gave alcohol to underage kids.
Bojack Horseman is a bad person, but that doesn't seem to be the show's point. The creator, Raphael Bob Waxberg, said, "It is very easy to see bad guys and say, that is a bad guy. But I think the truth is more complicated, and it does a disservice to us as a society to write off bad men and reward good men. The good men have done bad things, and the bad men have done good things. I don't think the good forgives the bad. But I also think the bad doesn't destroy the good. This ideology is a fundamental theme of the series."
There's no such thing as bad guys or good guys. We're all just guys.
Bojack Horseman suggests labeling people as good or bad is largely reductive, because if you're deemed bad, your negative actions are lumped into one indistinguishable pile, and anything good you do is automatically disregarded, making the prospect of change pointless. Or you use being bad as an excuse for your behavior, which just relinquishes your own responsibility from the actions that you do in fact control.
You're never going to be good because you're not bad. So you need to stop using that as an excuse.
Conversely, being a good person either underplays or even dismisses your bad behavior.
That's exactly the problem. Because he's so nice, people don't want to think he's capable of awful things, so they let him off the hook.
Or it sets you to an unrealistic standard where you're not allowed to make mistakes. Raphael expanded on this in an old blog post. He wrote, "When people self-identify as good, they believe that their actions can't possibly be bad, because they were actions done with the best of intentions by a good person. And any criticism of their actions becomes a criticism of them, a criticism which they must ultimately dismiss to continue feeling like they are good. So neither options are desirable, because as soon as you're dubbed either good or bad, there's only so much you can be."
Bojack, you ruin everything. That's what you are. And it actually took him saying it out loud for me to realize how stupid that is.
We're well versed in the extent of Bojack's bad actions, so we're not going to weigh them out or spend too much time on them. Honestly, we'd be here all day. And Bojack explicitly breaks down the why of his actions in Season 6, so we're not going to fixate too much on the psychology surrounding those actions. What I'm more interested in exploring in relation to the morality of Bojack's character is his impact on the audience, and the subsequent conversations going on behind the scenes. The writers were deliberately very cognizant of what was being said online about the show, and what viewers thought of Bojack as a character. In The Art Before the Horse, Chris McDonnell wrote, "Discussion in the writer's room often has centered around how far they can push Bojack's behavior without making him irredeemable." Staff writer Joe Lawson said that scene with Penny and Bojack on the boat was days and days of conversation. Mainly the conversation was, can we make Bojack irredeemable? And the answer is no. But we wanted to get right up to that line. Are we going to be able to come back from this? It was a genuine concern. They didn't want to make Bojack irredeemable to the audience. They didn't want to cross that line. But they did at the end of season 3, with the death of Sarah Lynn. Raphael Bob Waxberg told IndieWire, "I saw a lot of reaction from people when season 3 ended, saying, I'm done with this character. Bojack is unredeemable. He's unforgivable. He's crossed the last threshold of my compassion. I can't care about this character anymore." When Raphael saw Bojack's actions had finally crossed that line, he tried to adjust. It's like, after season 3, the writers felt they needed to swing the pendulum in the other direction toward likability to get the audience back in the gray area. So, they took Bojack out of the hot seat for season 4. And although he's nowhere near perfect, and definitely has some bad moments, comparatively, there's a noticeable difference. It's not that Bojack does anything that incredible in season 4. He's still very much himself, but let's be real, the bar is really low, so it's easy for him to impress. Like, Bojack's worst acts are so terrible that when he goes through a whole season without permanently traumatizing someone, he automatically looks like a saint. Season 4 also narratively works in Bojack's favor. He isn't in the first episode, so the audience has time to feel his absence and actually miss him. He does some good things. He helps Princess Carolyn, he lets Beatrice move in with him, and he bonds with a new significant character, Hollyhock. Season 4 also includes a fan-favorite episode shedding light on his internal monologue, making fans sympathize with him more. On top of that, the worst thing that happens is, for once, not really his fault. And the season ends on a high note, with him doing something selfless, helping Hollyhock find her mother. All of this worked a little too well. In their efforts to make Bojack find a middle ground with the audience, the writers overcorrected, where at the end of season 3, Bojack was flat out hated by fans. By the end of season 4, he was beloved. Raphael said, "At the end of season 4, a lot of people said, 'Oh my god, I love him. I'm so happy he's happy. He found the way to be. There's someone in his life now. This is great. This is wonderful.'"
That's so crazy how people like flip-flop. Like, you could do all these bad things, bro, but if you just have a good hot streak, then people start feeling sorry for you. And I feel like that's an inherent bad thing about human beings, is how quickly or how easily it seems you could change your image of yourself, for good or for worse. You can do a bunch of bad things and then do a couple good things. Now you're a good person. You can do a bunch of good things and do bad things. Do a lot of good things and do a lot of bad things. And then you're a bad person. And I mean, it's good in a sense because you're never not redeemable. But there's some things that people do that they should not get no forgiveness for. Like, if Bojack was real and there's a real person, or if you knew a person that was like 30 something or 40, I don't know how old Bojack is, and was like a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, and then you heard about the story about him going into a trailer park and almost having sex with this girl that is like 17, but that's the legal age of consent in New Mexico, you're going to look at that person really differently. And then also, if you knew somebody that was with somebody who, a famous child actor who died in their last final moments, and then you knew the relationship, because, you know, Sarah Lynn and Bojack was like a father-daughter relationship to an extent, and he had sex with her. Like, I'm saying, like, if you knew somebody like Bojack in real life and you knew all the things that he did, and then you like watch season 4 and then you're like, oh, all these things, like, I love him, he's like, that's not good. That's not good. But I don't know what the solution is. So does that mean, like, if you do bad things, you should forever be marked as a bad person? No, I don't think so. But I guess I'm just saying it should require more work. I don't think that we shouldn't be this quick to change a person that is damn near unredeemable to redeemable. in such a short amount of time.
Wonderful. I wanted to say, hold on. The guy at the end of season 4 is the same as the guy at the end of season 3. And I think the end of season 3 Bojack does not discount the end of season 4 Bojack. The end of season 4 Bojack also does not forgive the end of season 3 Bojack. How do you live with this guy who is both those things? Yes, it's true that Bojack's flaws make him more complex. But being more complex also makes him harder to understand. And if he's harder to understand, he's easier to misinterpret. The inevitable reality is, the more fleshed out Bojack becomes, the more likely people are to defend, rationalize, or justify his actions. In a Gothamist interview, when asked if he worried about certain audience members romanticizing Bojack, Raphael said, "Yes, I do worry about that. I think there's only so much that I can do to prevent that without being completely didactic and naked. But I am doing what I can because I do think it's important to kind of keep reminding the audience that Bojack is a cautionary tale, not a role model. And as much as we want you to care about him or empathize with him, you don't want to be him. And if you see parts of yourself in him, or parts of him in yourself, that is something to be concerned about, not comforted by. Although sometimes, not always, I will say, there are ways in which it is okay to be comforted by him. And that's what makes it a sticky, difficult thing, is that I also want our audience to feel comforted, and feel like it's okay to be depressed, or it's okay to have these self-hating feelings, or it's okay to come from a broken home. I think the way that Bojack reacts to this stuff is not always okay. I think that's an important distinction to make. So, it's tricky, because the writers of the show do want us to feel empathy for Bojack, but that's a slippery slope. And despite their attempts to counteract misinterpretation, some of these gray areas are baked into the structure of the show. Already, we're intrinsically conditioned to root for the protagonist. And sometimes it's easy to forget, but Bojack Horseman is a comedy. With that territory comes lighthearted jokes that lean into Bojack's alcoholism and addiction issues in a way not dissimilar to kitschy wine mom merch.
I just use a small dose to help me fall asleep at night, and then a much, much larger dose to get me through the day.
Can we please get some alcohol into my mouth?
There are jokes that lean into Bojack's worst traits, his selfishness, stubbornness, and carelessness.
Bojack, you really shouldn't throw a lit cigarette off the... Fine, I'll call 911.
I don't want the muffins. I was just looking at them. But I gotta say, if you put muffins down, they're not your muffins.
These jokes are often played in a similar vein as Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Endearing in their bluntness, relatable in sentiment more than execution.
That thing where you make a big deal over nothing and everyone laughs at you, but also at the same time we relate because you're saying all the things polite society won't.
Bojack Horseman offers up these little bits of comedic hedonism in more episodes than not, but offsets their toxicity by also showing the audience that Bojack's actions ultimately have very real and very permanent consequences. Still, there are people who fixate on the humor and ignore the underlying messages. There are fans who view flashbacks of Bojack's neglectful childhood, not as reasons for his adult behavior, but as excuses for it. There are people who equate Bojack's sadness and regret for his actions to earning exoneration of them. Some people see Bojack with his money, fame, and womanizing nature as cool or aspirational. Or they relate to Bojack's faults, but instead of using his desire to be better as motivation for themselves, they use Bojack's character to wallow in their own toxicity. Fans viewing Bojack as someone they want to be, or someone they revel in being similar to, is exactly what Raphael doesn't want.
That's what I think. I think Bojack is more of a role model to a lot more people rather than, well, like you said, a cautionary tale, because people just find more comfort in finding somebody else that's just like them, or finding, even if it's fictional, because obviously Bojack's not real, but I mean, he's such a real person, you know, I mean, he goes through such human experiences that people just find more comfort in somebody that is more like them than not, you know what I mean? Like, and I think people know that I shouldn't be relating to Bojack, or Bojack shouldn't make me feel this way, this feeling of comfort and of normalcy. People shouldn't feel that way about Bojack, but people just feel better. Like, I'm just saying, like, if I'm like a kid, right, or like, if I'm black, right, and I went to I'd much rather go to an all black school than an all white school. Or if I'm at a job and I see it's a predominantly white Hispanic workplace, and then I see two or three black people, I'm automatically comforted. And I feel like it's the same way with Bojack. Like if you just see someone that, no, it doesn't have to be right, but if we have a similar day-to-day experiences with feelings and things like that, I'll automatically gravitate towards you, whether if it's right or wrong. And I feel like that's inherently wrong, because you're gonna start gravitating to the wrong people, not to seek redemption, but to seek security. If that makes sense.
The podcast, Talk Easy with Sam Fragoso, Raphael said,
I like having flawed characters, and I think that can be very helpful for an audience to see a flawed character. But the question is, what do you do with those flawed characters? And how do you continue to show them in a real flawed way that doesn't feel like you are indulging their flaws? And I think it is good for flaws to be normalized and people to understand, oh, this thing that I thought that made me a terrible person that I can never tell anybody, I see that these characters have that, and these characters are capable of forgiveness, so maybe I could be forgiven too. I think that is a wonderful thing. I don't want people to take away from my show, oh, I will automatically be forgiven because I feel bad, which I think is a message some people do take from the show, which bothers me.
This overwhelming positive reception of Bojack as a character following season 4 was already concerning to Raphael Bob Waxberg. And then he got word that Harvey Weinstein was a fan of Bojack Horseman. Raphael told HuffPost, "When I heard that story, the idea that Harvey Weinstein watched my show really gave me chills. And I thought, what is he getting out of it? Does he watch it and go, yeah, that's right, that's the way to be? Us Hollywood guys, we're trouble. What are you going to do with us?" These instances, along with the rise of the Me Too movement, were strong influences on the writing and direction of where the show would go next. And where they ended up going is kind of ingenious. In Season 5, Bojack takes on the role of Detective John Filbert, the lead in a new dark detective drama show. Working within this series allowed the Bojack writers space to stretch out one of their familiar strengths, commenting on the entertainment industry, to explore a facet they hadn't yet examined, one that, not so coincidentally, paralleled their own. Many fans have speculated what TV show Filbert is specifically based on, and there has been some confirmation that True Detective was an inspiration, with a similar intro and mystery format. But Raphael has made it clear that Filbert is more of a catch-all than one singular series, a coalescence of shows that contain a, quote, unexamined male anti-hero. Though Filbert serves another purpose. While the Bojack writers play with genre-relevant tropes, they also use this fictional protagonist, John Filbert, to represent Bojack. As a character, yeah, but also as the audience sees him. They don't hold back either. The writers firmly establish the parallel between Filbert and Bojack right out of the gate at the start of Season 5. Both characters share similar names, and both shows are named after them. Filbert's house doesn't just look like Bojack's house, they verbally acknowledge the similarity, twice. Bojack and Filbert are essentially sleeping with the same person. Bojack hates Filbert for the same reasons he hates himself. The episode begins with a party at Filbert's and ends with a party at Bojack's. From the get-go, it's very consciously not subtle, and that's kind of the point.
It's not about you, you know? It's Filbert.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you get it.
By holding up a mirror to Bojack and Filbert, the writers also reflect that mirror onto themselves. They use this show within a show as a conduit to speak directly to the audience.
It's a TV show. It doesn't glamorize anything, but maybe it normalizes it.
Later in the season, Diane in particular echoes the writer's thoughts, while Bojack represents the fans misinterpreting and glorifying Filbert's, but really Bojack's character.
What this show says is that we're all terrible, so therefore we're all okay.
What? I didn't know it would feel like that, to be in that room, to hear people cheering for Filbert.
And though Diane's methods are at times repugnant at best, we will get there. The message is clear.
That's not the point of Filbert, for guys to watch it and feel okay. I wanted to make Filbert more well-rounded so the audience could relate to him better. I made him more vulnerable, and that made him more likable, which makes for a better TV show. But if Filbert is just a way to help dumb assholes rationalize their own awful behavior, well, I'm sorry, but we can't put this out there.
Dang, I did not know. That's so, like, what's the word? Like, clever how they integrated that. I didn't catch that. Wow.
Arguably, out of all of the characters, Diane Nguyen struggles with morality the most, solely because she cares about morality the most. Unlike other characters who, for much of the show, either don't really think about ethics, actively try not to think about them, or only think about them when it's convenient, Diane is someone who genuinely wants to do good in the world. In her earliest rendition, Diane was not a writer, but a development exec, still tasked with the role of helping Bojack with his comeback. Because Bojack's normal world is the entertainment industry and the corruption that comes with it, it makes sense that they would want to separate Diane from that world in order to highlight her moral contrast. Diane outlines her moral philosophy a few times throughout the show.
I don't think I believe in deep down. I kind of think all you are is just the things that you do.
She defines people by their actions, so she tries to make her actions good. While some people prioritize money or following a passion when they pursue a career, Diane seeks purpose and meaning through her writing. Because of this, it's easy for her to become disillusioned when she's faced with reality.
When I first moved to LA, I thought I was gonna be doing really important work. You know, just writing stuff that makes a difference. How do I make people care about the important stuff when all they want to do is read articles about who got slayed and who owned at the VMAs?
Diane is an idealist in a corrupt world. She's a compassionate person who feels deeply and is understandably affected by the injustices around her. The bad that exists simultaneously weighs her down and enrages her.
We're doing feminism. It's supposed to be fun.
This isn't fun for me.
But where most people can vaguely accept or ignore the injustices in the world and continue on in their day, Diane can't. She's impulsive and highly reactive, and sometimes I really respect her for it. Like, in Hank After Dark, while on a book tour with Bojack, Diane offhandedly references allegations against beloved late-night host Hank Hippopopoulos. The public backlash is instantaneous, but Diane stands her ground. She bravely defends the victims, women she doesn't even personally know, and continues to, even after being ruthlessly defamed by the media and receiving literal death threats from people who know where she lives. But as intelligent and well-informed as she is, Diane has a tendency to get...
I did not see that part. Diane Noose? That's kind of crazy.
...caught in the details and only focus on what's right in front of her. When this happens, she's often unable to take a step back, separate her feelings or thoughts from a situation, and see the bigger picture. We see this over and over again throughout the series. Like when she accidentally tweets on pop star Sextina Aquafina's Twitter, prompting Sextina to publicly abort her fictional dolphin and make a pretty radical music video about it. Diane is quick to criticize her for causing a negative effect on society.
I gotta take the high road and go on the news and rat those suckers out.
Is that really a good idea?
Despite being Sextina's literal social media manager, it takes a teenager approaching Diane for her to realize that the young female fans that are directly affected by Sextina's extreme approach actually view it as satirical and empowering.
And when you can joke about it, it makes it less scary, you know?
Yeah.
Again and again, Diane gets the lines between ethics and her personal feelings blurred. And sometimes, when she's in vigilante mode, these blinders can even make her immune to her own hypocrisy.
It is illegal for a restaurant to serve people water before they ask for it. There is a drought.
In Season 5, Diane is upset when What Time Is It Right Now hires Vance Wagner to work on Filbert. She scolds his publicist, Anna Spanakopita, for working with him.
When you, as a woman, give awful men the cover of your friendship, you are then complicit. No, you're culpable for the terrible things they do.
This backfires when Anna has Vance Wagner parrot the speech as a reason why he won't work on Filbert. While Diane zeroes in on how Filbert is in the wrong, the truth is that she is too. Diane is arguably Bojack's closest friend. Even though she doesn't initially know everything that we know, she wasn't with us in New Mexico with Penny or the planetarium with Sarah Lynn, Diane still knows who Bojack is, and she still supports him despite it. Beyond their friendship, Diane is largely responsible for Bojack's comeback. Way back in Season 1, when Diane was his memoirist, she leaked the first few chapters of One Trick Pony because she knew the public reception would be positive. She knew exactly who Bojack was, and she believed the book would make him liked and culturally relevant.
Oh my goodness.
And she fought.
That moment was so heavy. He was like, Diane, tell me I'm a good person. Tell me I'm a good person. And he was like, there's still hope for me, right? And then he was like, and then I think Diane said no, or she didn't answer at all. Or she said, I don't know, Bojack. And then I think he was crushed, and then the episode concluded. Oh, no. And then the man was like, are you that guy from Horsing Around? And then the episode concluded. I was like, yo, crazy.
Fought for it to happen. And it did. Yes, end of the day, Bojack's actions are his actions, and no one else is responsible for them. But by helping his career and supporting him as a friend, Diane is the person she outwardly condemns.
When you, as a woman, give awful men the cover of your friendship, you are then complicit. No, you're culpable for the terrible things they do.
She doesn't even begin to consider this until Anna makes her confront her own hypocrisy by playing her the audio of Bojack talking about Penny. The worst instance of Diane's hypocrisy happens after she hears Bojack's tape, and it might be the most unethical thing Diane does in the entire show. After listening to the tape, and after Bojack tells her they're the same, Diane takes over Flip's script and writes a scene with Filbert that parallels what happened in New Mexico. They're so behind schedule that they have to use cue cards. But for Diane, it's also a way to intentionally catch Bojack off guard. On a cinematic level, it's an incredible scene that really pulls you in, and the tension is only heightened by the rush production is in to get the scene done. You can feel Bojack's confusion and shock as he starts to realize that he's seen this film before, and he didn't like the ending. But if we were to approach this scene purely from an ethical stance, Diane's actions are, well, they're horrible. Diane is smart enough to surmise that the girl from the tape is Bojack's old friend Charlotte's daughter, and even that Bojack went to Penny's college on his bender with Sarah Lynn. But despite having all of that information, she somehow doesn't stop to consider the impact this scene airing would have on Penny. Diane's not thinking about the actual victim in the situation, and how she might feel if she just casually walked into a room and saw the scene playing on a TV, which, by the way, is incredibly plausible. Filbert is a popular show in this world. Bojack the show also establishes that Penny's family watches Birthday Dad. The TV could be left on. Her friends could talk about it. This episode could play on a TV in the diner where she works. She could go on Twitter and read about it. Penny could even seek it out herself. It's totally feasible that after Bojack ambushes her at school, she likes to keep tabs on him and know where he is so she feels safe. The point is, there are a myriad of ways that Penny could organically find out about this scene. And for just a second, because Diane didn't, let's consider what she would think if she did. Penny's first thought might be, is Bojack mocking what happened? Do the writers of the show know? Is it supposed to be some kind of sick joke at her expense? Is it his grandiose way of apologizing? Or is it some kind of a threat to say, look how easily I can exploit your trauma for entertainment and get away with it? But even in the most innocuous scenario, if Bojack was giving the writers ideas, he didn't have to pick USS New Mexico, but he did, planting it like an Easter egg knowing that she would recognize it. Is he trying to get her attention? None of the answers to these hypotheticals add up to anything remotely good. They're all rabbit holes that Penny has no way of knowing the answer to without talking to Bojack directly, which, again, could be the very reason he did it, to get her to reach out to him. Now, of course, we know he didn't, and was ambushed, but that doesn't matter, because realistically, what conclusion is Penny more likely to come to? That Bojack's close friend who works on the show found out and passive-aggressively confronted him as they shot the scene? Or that Bojack, the star of this TV show, and an alcoholic who has literally stalked Penny at least once before, seeking her out on the other side of the country from where he lives, intentionally had this scene written into the show for her to see. But Diane does not consider any of this, because she's not thinking about the girl from the tape. She's not even thinking about justice. The only thing she wants in this moment is to hurt Bojack. That's all this is, a means to punish him, not even necessarily for what he did, but for not confiding in her about it. This is Diane at her worst. This is her biggest problem, because she's objectively right in her moral argument. She feels like she is justified in whatever actions that anger brings, even if it causes more harm than good. Diane weaponizes morality. At her best, Diane wants to have a positive impact on the world. She wants to do good things, to help people and create real change. But what she slowly learns throughout the series is that it can't always be in the way that she envisions. Diane's instinct is to fight the current head-on, in whatever form it may take, but often this can lead to her setting unrealistic expectations for herself and others because she believes it's the right thing to do. But it's like swimming in a riptide. The straight, instinctive path to shore is the one that causes swimmers to get exhausted and drown. Diane's depressive episodes are a direct result of growing tired and frustrated doing what she thinks she should be doing, what she views as the ideal path that aligns with her morals, the path that doesn't always work. But the best path isn't always the most obvious, and failure on one route doesn't mean you can't get to where you want to be on another. This is a lesson that Diane learns throughout the show. Just because you only see one way to go doesn't mean there aren't other directions that lead to the same or even a better place. Because Diane doesn't have to travel to war-torn Cordovia to be able to directly help people. She doesn't need to work at the New Yorker to write articles that start important conversations, and she doesn't have to create a memoir on damage for her writing to help people deal with their own. The most fulfilled version of Diane we see is when she lets herself take a path she typically wouldn't.
It's for here.
Is this your way of asking me to move to Chicago?
Couldn't ask you to do that.
I wouldn't ask you to ask. If Sonny's going to Houston, then we're going.
I'd feel better if you just tried the medication your doctor prescribed.
Well, I'd feel worse. I don't want to write a middle-grade fiction detective series. I decided that one day I would write something that would make little girls like me feel less alone. And if I can't write that book...
Then maybe write this other book.
Good luck with your braces. I think they look cool.
Maybe this book does that too.
Yeah?
Yeah, no, I get it. It's just parts of it felt real, you know?
Bojack, I can't wait for you to be better. I need you in my life. And you can be grateful for them, even if they were never meant to be in your life forever. I'm glad I knew you too.
In so many ways, Bojack Horseman is responsible and conscientious in a way that other shows just aren't. And that is largely because of Raphael Bob Waxberg and his belief that television affects people. He believes that TV has the power to influence and change how people think. Look, this is a complicated and polarizing topic. How media directly influences people is not an easy thing to measure, and it's something I go back and forth on all the time. Yeah, it's one thing if a show or film is marketed to children. That's much more clear-cut. I've talked about that before. But when a TV show or a film is made for adults, it's murkier. And I don't mean if you watch Hannibal, you're gonna want to barbecue somebody. But like, okay, in a HuffPost interview, Raphael discussed how proud he feels when fans tell him Bojack helped them understand their emotions or feel validated from the show's representation of asexuality. He then added, but if I'm going to feel good about those stories, it's disingenuous to say I have the power to affect people in a good way, but how dare you accuse me of affecting people in a bad way? And there does seem to be a consensus that fiction can affect us positively. I've never seen anyone debate that. But when it's proposed that fiction can also affect us negatively, people are quick to disagree. Raphael addressed his perspective on the podcast Talk Easy with Sam Fragoso.
And something I wrestle with on the show a lot too is how aware are we when we watch something? Is there enough distance? I am a very susceptible individual of the art that I consume. And I think a lot of these conversations are difficult to have because not everybody is the same, right? I think some people can quite effectively consume art and not be affected by it in that way. And then someone else says, well, you know, this is really influencing people. And they go, what are you talking about? I don't understand that because that is not a feeling that I have when watching it. And I'm the opposite, right? Like when people say, no, I can discern fact from fiction in that way, and I can not be affected by art in that way, I don't understand it, and I kind of don't believe it. When I go see, let's say, like a Wes Anderson movie, and then, like, for the next day, I'm, like, talking like Wes Anderson character, you know?
That's what you do?
Yeah, or, like, Woody Allen, Quentin Tarantino, any
Why
of
do you
these
say it like
guys,
that?
and those are two guys
That's what you do.
that I don't want to be like, you know?
They don't always get it right. Despite the show's strong messaging against putting people in good or bad boxes, we are clearly meant to view Vance Wagner as a bad person. Raphael recognizes this double standard. He told HuffPost, as we were breaking down the story about Vance Wagner, we started to think, well, how is Bojack different from this? Are we hypocrites if we constantly want our audience to feel bad for Bojack while also saying what a terrible thing it is that our industry forgives guys like Vance Wagner? And that is honestly very self-aware and valid criticism of themselves. I hate to compare levels of wrongdoings, but if we look purely at the characters' actions, are Vance and Bojack really so different? They've both driven while intoxicated. They've both abused their celebrity status. They've both hurt women. They've both victimized themselves. And, to certain extents, they've both been involved with underage girls. What makes it different for Raphael, and consequently Diane and the audience, is that Vance Wagner represents a public figure that Raphael and the writers don't personally know, supposedly Mel Gibson. Raphael has implied that he considers the act of forgiveness of public figures to be different from the forgiveness of people that you personally know. But even though Bojack is technically a public figure too, he's not treated with that same distance. There is a subjectivity of closeness that we don't have with Vance. And again, we're conditioned to root for the protagonist, with the character we spend the most time with. Because of that, it's hard for us to be fully objective. It's contradictory and complicated because relationships with people like Bojack are contradictory and complicated. But also, Vance is satirized in the same way that Flip and Sebastian St. Clair are. Their characters may be based on real people, or a culmination of problematic commonalities and tropes among specific groups of people. The tortured artist showrunner that walks over everyone. The performative, wealthy philanthropist that prioritizes his own image above all, and the actor that gets away with doing terrible things and is never fully held accountable for them. For most of the series, Bojack is the real fleshed-out counterpart of what Vance represents. If Bojack was a real person, based on the public's awareness of his actions, it could easily be speculated that he was an inspiration for the character of Vance Wagner. Though it is important to note that the writers enforced one very significant, very defining difference between Bojack and Vance. Unlike Vance, Bojack recognizes and cares that his actions are morally wrong, and he genuinely wants to become a better person. This distinction is vital to the show's theme. It's what keeps Bojack from straying into narcissism. It's what keeps the tone's undercurrent optimistic, this never-ending possibility of change.
What if I relapse again?
Then you'll get sober again.
Don't get me wrong, sometimes, well, a lot of the time, Bojack Horseman can get bleak. It's kind of an ongoing joke in the fandom, poking fun at like, hey, who knew this comedy about a cartoon talking horse would be the darkest show you've ever watched? And that definitely has merit. But Raphael always saw his show as ultimately hopeful. When I think of the most feel-good parts of the series, my mind goes to scenes that give us hope for Bojack's change. His smile knowing he's reconnecting with Hollyhock. The montage in rehab when we see him put effort into recovery. When he finds community at the church service reenactment, symbolically letting go of his internalized hatred of horses. The emotional fulfillment he experiences teaching kids acting at Wesleyan. These moments are profound because despite everything Bojack has done, we still want him to get better. Raphael said, I would like to see Bojack find some sort of peace. I don't know if happiness is the right word. I don't know if he deserves that. But I would like to think even a soul as lost as Bojack can somehow crawl his way toward redemption. When Netflix releases a new season of a series on their platform, they'll often wait to see initial popularity and audience feedback before weighing out their slate and deciding whether to renew the show for another season or cancel it altogether. This is notoriously the case for animated shows, whose contracts are usually only for one season at a time, and whose plugs Netflix are more likely to pull because they have less broad appeal. Even though Bojack Horseman was Netflix's first animated original series produced in-house, that didn't exempt it from potentially being canceled. It wasn't until the beginning of season 6 that Raphael Bob Waxberg was told it was going to be the last season. Before that point, the writers had no way of knowing if the season they were working on would be their last. So these season finale moments, they're incredibly significant because each one had the possibility of being the end of the series as a whole. And they had to be written with that in mind. And no matter how horrible Bojack's actions were in that season, no matter how hopeless any chance for his redemption seemed, every time the writers were faced with choosing one final message to leave the audience with, they made sure that message was the same.
Thanks, man. You're like my hero.
Really?
Huh.
It gets easier.
How?
Every day it gets a little easier. But you gotta do it every day. That's the hard part.
But I've never had a brother.
Hello, I am Bojack Horseman, and I am here because I need help. Life's a bitch and then you die, right?
Sometimes. Sometimes life's a bitch and then you keep living.
Yo,
I
that's
guess
crazy.
That's it. If you liked this video, please subscribe and hit the bell so you're notified the next time I emerge from my crypt. If you have more of a Bojack itch to scratch, you're in luck because there are like a bajillion more video essays on YouTube on so many different characters and topics. Honestly, I steer clear of other creators' videos on the same subject I'm working on or about to work on because I'm scared I'll accidentally subconsciously sponge their ideas into my own work. But I do remember really loving this video by Johnny Two Cellos. In it, he analyzes how the sitcom paradigm from Horse and Around is mirrored onto one of my favorite episodes, but with much darker results. It's really good, highly recommend it. Thanks for watching.
Great. Shout out to Sloan Stowe. She makes great stuff. This is a really good video. I like the pacing of it, and it's really good. Anyway, that'll cover just about it. Actually, let me use some thought. Watch Bojack Horseman. Watch Bojack Horseman. I don't know why you would watch this video and not watch Bojack Horseman, or maybe this made you want to watch Bojack Horseman, but you should. It's really good. It's really good. And like, it's kind of interesting because I'm not like, I don't really go through much of the things that Bojack go through. I'm not a depressive, sad person myself. Not saying that being depressive and sad is not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's okay. It's normal. But please get help if you can. But yeah, I'm saying I'm not that type of person, but Bojack Horseman is really good, and I love Bojack Horseman, and I loved it because it made me like relate. Okay, so this is another aspect of life that people go through, and Bojack Horseman does a great job depicting that. As you can see, like if you really didn't go through much like strife, or not, if you didn't have a lot of emotional turmoil. If you watch Bojack Horseman, you'll see like the other side of that coin and really be able to like connect with it and really understand like, wow, other people go through stuff that you didn't think were imaginable. And that's what Bojack did to me. Really like connected, like this is also capable of being a human experience, you know? But yeah, if you haven't watched it, watch it. Great video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.